entrepreneur has to solve for three things when they start a company: resources, network, and expertise. And you need at least two out of the three in order to feel confident starting your company.
I'm Vanessa Chan from Kinetic Creators, and the theme of today's show is how to stay true to being you when you're developing your enterprise. And oftentimes people are kind of looking at like a magical formula on how to start something. In reality, entrepreneurship is not black or white, and you really have to find your kind of authentic voice and personality when you do it. And I will say that my friend Lisa Sun is one of my favorite people as the CEO of Project Gravitas, because she has always stayed true to who she is, which is a real inspiration to me. And so I'm really excited to be introducing her to everyone on Kinetic Creators. And so Lisa, welcome to our group.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get it started, maybe you can talk to everyone about what is Project Gravitas and where did you get this idea from?
Well, it's just Gravitas. It's just Gravitas. We dropped the project a couple of years ago. My first boss at McKinsey, I was at McKinsey & Company for 11 years. My first boss told me I didn't have any Gravitas. And and by the way, she was the first woman head of any McKinsey office. So when I asked her, how do I get Gravitas? She said, go buy a new dress, wear big jewelry and great shoes, which you can imagine as an analyst is incredibly offensive feedback. You're making $43,000 a year. And, you know, I was a size 18, 20 at the time. And my boss just told me to buy new clothes. When I asked her why a few weeks later, she said, actually, I wasn't telling you to buy new clothes. When you wake up in the morning, you're the first person you have to like in the mirror. I can teach you how to be good at this job. I can't teach you how to believe in yourself. And so she said, when I put on a dress, it's like Dumbo's flying feather. He never needed the feather to fly, but it reminded him to believe in himself. So in September 2013, we launched Gravitas. Our mission is to catalyze confidence. Our first product is we patented building shapewear into clothes. And 6 weeks after the company launched, Oprah named us favorite thing and gave us 2 pages in her favorite things issue. And so what has evolved over the last few years is, while our mission is to catalyze confidence, our products all have intelligent function or a patented innovation, but it's wrapped around in versatile, inclusive fashion. So we were size 0 to 26W before it was cool to be inclusive, mostly because I've been every size, including a size 22. And you know, it's fun. We make beautiful things. Obviously the pandemic has forced us to pivot with purpose. So 2/3 of our business, we have also a manufacturing. So we have Gravitas as the main label. We have a manufacturing and production development business in 5 countries in Asia, where we produce for 98 different brands, everything from high visibility safety vests all the way to now hospital gowns for major hospitals. And then we have a media and content business. So it started out as Gravitas, but then quickly has morphed into other verticals.
And the thing I really love about it is it came from a pretty raw feedback, right? And oftentimes when you get raw feedback like that, people can kind of just shrink and be like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this? And it kind of stayed with you and blossomed into something amazing. So talk to me a little bit about, you know, when you're an analyst, right, versus when you left McKinsey, it was a pretty long time period in between.
Yeah,
how did that kind of thread go through, right?
Well, I always think of feedback as a gift. You know, the mentor chooses you, you don't choose the mentor. So in life, I think we all need to make ourselves very mentorable and see that if someone really cares about you, if someone really sees something special in you, they care enough to give you feedback. And so I've never taken feedback personally. Maybe it's because I'm an overachiever and I just go, well, that person just wants me to be better. Think about great athletes. Like if anyone watched The Last Dance and we looked at Michael Jordan, it drove him to be even better, right? So I think of feedback and practice as really somebody cares enough about you. If someone didn't care about you, they wouldn't take the time to tell you. And so one of the things I did really well, and as evidenced by the story of the founding of the company, is I think people have a hard time asking for feedback. So I would actually, because if you say, oh, can I have feedback? They're like, oh, you're doing fine. It's like being at a at a clothing store and someone's like, do you need help? You're like, oh, no, not really. I usually do what's one thing I can do better, because almost anybody can tell you one thing. And when I was an analyst and an associate, even as an associate principal at the firm, I had a little notebook that was called the One Thing Notebook. And I would ask everyone, like, what's one thing I could do better? And I'd collect a list of one things and I would cross them off as I mastered them. So, even going back to my boss at the time, my DGL, and saying, like, how do I get gravitas? It was very specific. Give me one thing I could do tomorrow. But I really think that if someone takes the time to give you feedback, it means that they genuinely care about you. And if you start with that positive intent, then you end up being much better at your job, at whatever you do.
We're having this notebook of specific things that you could improve on, like what's the one thing I could do better? Were there themes there that you saw that you really wanted to work on? Were people giving you the consistent feedback over and over, or was it always very different?
I think at the beginning it was fairly consistent. I mean, it was very much related to coming across as very youthful. I think if you had met me in 2000, I'm from California, so I had a California accent. I'm like, this is a great opportunity. And my speech therapist at the firm said, this is a great opportunity, right? Like most of the feedback, I think, in the early years was, and I think that's a problem with consulting, right? You put young people into very challenging roles and you ask them to do things in compressed timeframes. And so your feedback is always going to be, you come across as young. And I'm Asian, right? I know what you're thinking. Thank goodness for these genetics. There's no way she's been working for 22 years. I have been. So I would say the theming at the beginning wasn't that you're not smart and capable and talented. It was more around, you come across as quite youthful. I think as you progress anywhere, your feedback will evolve and change. And I think at some point, and this is possibly, bad advice, but I'll say this, at some point you're kind of stuck with who you are, right? Like I now know everything I'm not good at. And I'm now at the stage in my career where I can hire people who are much better at it than I am. So now I think the feedback for me personally is more around, where do I hire to fill around my gaps and let other people do things that I don't know how to do. For my business, from a product development and a marketing standpoint, I think it's constant, right? And I'm okay with it. But personally, I would say most of my feedback the first 5 years was around being youthful, overzealous. The nice thing about owning your own business now is I don't have to report to anyone. The bad news is it's all on me.
Well, and I think this feedback on being youthful is something that all students get, right? And all the founders that we've talked to who started their startups right after college all had that issue. So what are some very concrete things that people can work on so they are taken more seriously when they look really young?
Well, I mean, that's like a whole thing on its own. I really think that when you're in your 20s, it's a very hard balance, because on the one side, you don't want to come across as overly confident. You still want to be humble and hungry and mentorable. At the same time, being young means sometimes you do have to be a bit more assertive without being obnoxious, right? I think it's a really hard thing in your 20s to do this well. Most of the time, the kind of examples I give to people is to start from a place where you do know something and you are able to communicate your value. I was really good at disarming people with unconscious bias. So I think that one of my techniques when I was kind of coming up the corporate ladder was to make the unconscious bias conscious in a way that was comfortable and disarming. So I think it was around the 5th or 6th year that I was at McKinsey, and you're kind of in a manager level. Whenever we did intros with a client, I would say, I've been at the firm 5 years. My specialty is this. I know what you're thinking. I mean, I just did it with all of you. I know what you're thinking. Man, those genetics are amazing. How does she look so good? It's because I'm Asian, but I have been at this job. I was really good at taking people's perceptions of me and just making it transparent. Put it on the table, right? I do look young. I think I also took advantage of a ton of resources. So the nice thing about being at a large corporate environment like McKinsey, I was possibly the only person in my office that used the speech therapist, Judy Marcus. I used her twice a month. Like, I would always be the person who booked an appointment, and she would just walk me through my presentations and give me feedback. I booked the life coaches. I mean, I was really good at accessing resources and being like, well, they're giving it to me for free. I mean, it wasn't free. I was working really hard. I was like, there's all these perks and no one's using them. I was always the only person at the speech therapist sessions on Fridays. I was like, why is no one else using you, Judy?
Yeah, and I like the fact that you disarm, right? I think it's disarming people is always great. So if there's a way you can use humor or not be offended by things, then I think that's great. I remember one time when I was asked by someone, I was going into a client situation. They're like, well, how old are you? Was literally the first question they asked me. And I was like, oh, a woman never discloses her age, right? And after that, he really liked me because I was kind of more back at him. And so I think there's a way that, one has to learn how to do that. So it makes a ton of sense. And I love what you said as well, which is when you get older, you kind of embrace all the things you're bad at. It's kind of like embracing cellulite. It is what it is, right? It's going to be there and you're not going to be ashamed of it. And so I love the fact that you've kind of grown into knowing where you have to hire and hire for where you're weak. And so how have you kind of embraced that? Like, what are areas? By the way, sorry,
Vanessa, the one thing I will say to you though is like, and this is probably why we as a company believe that fashion has a important role to play. I've been asked a lot of times, how do I feel about business casual environments? And I've often said to people, I don't think we dress for other people. I think we dress for ourselves. And I think that's the most powerful form of dressing. So if and again, it comes back to, I don't think gravitas is performative. I don't think, I don't believe in fake it until you make it. I think that's actually just being performative. I think you start with, I believe in myself. I know my inherent gifts. I know the things that I'm the best at in the world. For us, clothing is a way to channel that, right? And so fashion for me and having gravitas at a young age, when you invest in your personal appearance, it gives you yourself your best sense of self when you look in the mirror. So every time someone asks me about like, what do you think about the casualization? What do we think about Zoom calls? All of that. I'm like, I'm not dressing for you. I actually did my hair today for me because it makes me feel good about myself. It makes me perform my best. Whatever that is for you, you need to know what that is. It doesn't have to be fashion, right? But there's something that makes you feel really good about going into the day and being confident and taking it on. So part of just having gravitas, having confidence, having that maturity is also just continuing to believe in yourself in that way. So I'm good at like I would say I really, really suck at details. I'm really bad at operational stuff. I'm really good at like strategy and marketing and business development and motivation and people development. I'm really good at the softer things. I really, really suck at inventory planning and allocation and production calls. And it's not that I don't know how to do it. And this is what I always tell people. It's like, I'm good at it. I went to McKinsey, right? I know how to run a spreadsheet, but I really get no energy out of it. It is energy draining to me on a daily basis. And so early on, it's so funny. People look at my org chart and they're like, really? I have a bunch of old Chinese ladies in their 60s who run production for me. I've also hired people who are really good at follow through, really detail oriented. I am, if you know Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENFP, which basically means I'm really disorganized and all over the place and I'll never hit a deadline. So I've surrounded myself with people who are very deadline driven, task oriented, detail oriented people.
But I think the point you're making, though, is that you can't fake all that stuff, right? I mean, obviously, you wouldn't have been able to stay at McKinsey as long as you had if you could make deals and so forth or do numbers. So you forced yourself to do it. But the point was it was sapping, right? It wasn't fun for you. And so now you're kind of more your authentic self where you're like, you know what, this stuff I don't like to do. So let's let other people do it. I'll hire for it. But you were able to do that for a while. But I think where you were very authentic, when I knew you at McKinsey, you were always the best dressed person I knew. And you always loved retail, right? And so that was where you were always true. Like, actually, I don't know if you remember, the first time I met you was in the gym when we were at some kind of training, and you're better dressed than the people who are not at the gym.
What I would say is like, I don't think that, thank you for saying that I was dressed well. I think the thing that, one of my biggest insecurities in life is I have never been thin. I'm totally open saying that to everyone and men in the audience, about to give you insight into a woman's psyche. I have never been a thin person. It's just like I've been a size 6, 8, 12, 14, 22, currently post-pandemic, like a 14, 16. I've never been a thin person. Um, but one of the things I realized was it was holding me back from feeling good about myself. And I started to learn that I could dress in a way that made whatever size I was at look its best. And so I probably spent a lot of time on dressing, in part because I was, compensating for an insecurity around my body. Now I don't really care, because the whole premise of my company is just kind of love who you are right in this moment, whether or not you're thin or it doesn't matter. But that's probably why I was trying to address a fundamental insecurity in who I am as a person. Not
But
that
you
you all
did it
need
really
to know that,
well.
but welcome to my psyche.
You did it really well because you were on Washington's best dress list when you were at McKinsey. I remember that.
That's easy in DC. DC was not a very
I
well
know.
dressed place. Before the
I was like, I
Obamas.
know her. I know her.
I know, but the Obamas made it fashionable. Prior to that, it was very easy I was definitely on that list when Bush was in office.
Well, I remember I was like, wow, I wasn't wrong when I said she was really well dressed. And so, one of the fun things also about you is like, you knew you loved fashion, right? And so you helped to build out the retail practice, right, at McKinsey. And you have a little bit of an unusual path, because a lot of people, when they start entrepreneurship, they do it right out of college when they have no commitment, they don't have a mortgage, they don't have kids. So talk to us a little bit about your path, right? How did you, graduate from college, and what did you do?
So my parents are entrepreneurs. They came to the US with no money. My mom worked on a hamburger truck. My dad worked on a loading dock. When I graduated from school, I took the MCAT, the LSAT, the GRE. I applied to med school, law school, English grad school. My dad wanted me to be a doctor. My mom wanted me to be the first Asian woman Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Right, like this is the 80s when my parents were got amnesty from Reagan, so they thought lawyers were very powerful. I wanted to study Jane Austen for the rest of my life, so I wanted to go to English grad school. My mom got cancer, and so I ended up going. My dad said, "You come work for me." So I worked in a scrap metal yard in Fontana, California. Estoy aprendiendo español. 80 workers. No one spoke English. So funny, I got a letter this week from my middle school principal who remembers going to my parents' restaurants in Fontana and helped my parents retire. My parents, knock on wood, my mom's been in remission for almost 20 years from cancer, and they ended up retiring, moving back to Taiwan. And I applied to McKinsey off cycle. So this was back when McKinsey used to do spring recruiting. And so I actually got hired in April, which is very rare. I started at the firm in 2000. And if you guys might not be old enough to remember, '01, we had like a mini recession. It was like the first .com bust. And out of my 12-person analyst class, 11 people left 1 year into their tenure. So I was the only person left in my analyst class. Meanwhile, by the way, my teenage brother was living with me, because remember, my mom has cancer. They're kind of dealing with that. And I didn't want to lose my job. So I ended up being the only analyst in my class to stay and go direct to associate. I don't think it was because I was the best analyst. In fact, I think there were ones better than me. It was just, I really needed the work, and they couldn't let all the analysts go, right? They needed someone to do the modeling for whatever client work was still left. In '05, my brother ended up going to college. And so Joanna Barsh, who's a very well-known former senior partner at McKinsey, gave this talk, and she said, in life, you have to ask yourself 3 questions. What am I good at? What do I love to do? And what am I passionate at? Or what am I passionate about? And they don't have to be the same things, right? So I remember writing down, like, I'm good at problem solving. I'm good at analytics. I don't love it, as you now know. What am I good at? I'm good at helping people. I'm genuinely interested in helping other people succeed. I think it makes for a nice and very codependent relationship with clients when you are that invested in their success. I love seeing people succeed and be happy and do well in life. And then I was passionate about fashion, mostly because, as you now know, I hadn't been able to participate, right? As a size 18, 20 woman, you just don't participate in those categories. So I had an authentic point of view around how important those categories could become. So in '05, ended up working with a bunch of partners in the retail practice. And then 06, 07, when the economy was good, we founded the apparel, fashion, and luxury practice at the firm. So, and then I left in 2012. I had earned a year of search time that McKinsey paid me for. And I just went around the world and hung out and went to fashion shows and did really fun things that I never had time to do because I had all these miles, and then started the company.
I love that. And so, you know, if you take a look at kind of your McKinsey experience and then transition to your company, what were the things that were helpful or not helpful coming from McKinsey and starting a company? Because it's not pretty typical for people to do that. Most people leave McKinsey and become a corporate executive somewhere. So you went to go start something new.
Well,
what was that like?
I mean, I was really lucky in that, so the last 2 months of my year off, and by the way, I know that that sounds obnoxious, right? Like, let me be transparent about the fact that, like, who gets to have a year off, right? Most of us have to work full time. I do believe in pause buttons. So even if it's not a year off, even if it's one day without your devices, like just turn off your phone. But I'm a huge fan of like taking like 2 or 3 hours off and just like thinking about your life, right? I think we're a very reactive mode most of the time, and your brain waves are shortened and all of that. So I ended up going around the world, and on my last 2 months of the holiday, I went to visit my parents in Taiwan. And my mom, I could tell she was trying to ask a question without asking it. If anyone has exposure to a tiger mom, or like, I feel like a lot of people's moms, you don't have to be Asian to understand a tiger mom. Some people just have moms like this. The last couple of weeks of my time there, she was like, over dinner, when I said, you cannot live at home. Home is nice, but you must go back job. You must find a new job. You cannot live here. And I had just finished reading Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs. And if anyone remembers that great Stanford commencement speech, Connect the Dots of Your Life, I had connected all the dots of my life on this napkin on a beach in Greece by myself on this like year off. And I pull out this napkin and I go, you know, I have this napkin. It's going to tell me what to do. And my mom said, napkin is not job. How much money you save? And I told her how much money I'd saved working for, you know, over a decade. Oh, good. You bet on yourself. You start company. And I was like, okay. And this is where I tell people, if there were a like Tiger Mom of the Year award, right? If there was like a magazine that could award that, you know, she thought Amy Chua's book was written about her. Like, see, I was right. Someone write a book about me. I have real issues, by the way, with that book. But I literally think she would try to win the award every year and like wave a flag in the annual parade, right? The next morning, with the 12-hour time difference between Taiwan and New York, I had 10 emails in my inbox. My mom's lawyer, your mom's starting a company. What's the name of it? She told me to get started on paperwork. My accountant, your mom says you're starting a company. I have to open up a bank account. Here's your tax paperwork. My business manager, I got this weird phone call from your mom. She's not even an authorized signer on your account. She told me to transfer all this money into a small business, you know, and it was all these emails. And I walked into the breakfast room and I was like, what did you do last night? She said, you'll not have guts. I go on the internet. I start a company last night. And that was October 12th, 2012. And I tell that story because, you know, I think in most cases, there are people in your life that push you to pursue your passion and tell you it's okay to go after your purpose. And you have to listen to those signs. So my mom told me to start a company. I think every entrepreneur has to solve for 3 things when they start a company: resources, network, and expertise. And you need at least two out of the 3 in order to feel confident starting your company. The nice thing is McKinsey had given me resources. I'd saved 10% of my paycheck for 11 years because my mom told me to. So I didn't have to raise money. And what's nice is you don't have to write a business plan if you're not going to share it with anyone. So didn't raise money, but I had resources. I'm in a very lucky position. I often say being an older entrepreneur means that you don't have to sweat going and asking for money. So go make money somewhere else and then go do it. The second thing is network. I built up this huge Rolodex. Oh my God, you're so young. You don't even know what a Rolodex is. A contact list, a huge contact list, an address book of everybody in fashion, and all these unbelievable people that I could call upon, as well as McKinsey partners who were willing to support me. And then expertise. I would not, by the way, I would now tell you there was a lot of stuff I did not know about starting an apparel company, but I thought I did. I definitely did not know what I was doing. but I had solved for a lot of the things I think you need. And the most important thing is not waiting. And so if I had solved those three, and I think my mother, because my parents are entrepreneurs, I just saw them get stuff done. So as you now know, I did not write a business plan. Right? I had like 5 pages in a very, very simple spreadsheet. And I just ended up every 2 weeks getting something done. I opened the bank account. I got the GoDaddy password. I just did things. And then 8 weeks later, I realized, oh my God, I have a business. I think a lot of people think they could start a business, and everybody has great ideas. Very few people have the will to go and execute them. And then just start doing it, right? I'm a huge fan of like, don't overthink it. Just start getting stuff done, putting it out into the world, and it'll get better as you do it. I'm also, as Vanessa heard the other day, I'm not a fan of NDAs. Everybody has your idea. There's no new ideas, like I promise you. And so I never held on to my business. In fact, in February of 2013, about 7 months before we launched the company, I invited 200 people into my home, 5 people a night for 40 nights. There's no biblical reference. It just happened that way. And I let them beat up my business. I just said, tell me what I'm doing wrong. And all my friends and former colleagues, there was one night where one of my girlfriends, the old tagline of my company was "Be Remembered," because I think you remember people who have gravitas. And she's like, oh my God, that sounds like rest in peace. Like, that's a terrible tagline. And we'd already like printed business cards, right? And she goes, I think it should be "Own Your Moment." And I'm like, oh yeah, I like that. So we changed it. One night, an A-list celebrity came to my apartment. She's like, Oprah's gonna love this. And she called Oprah, and she put me on an email chain with Oprah the next day. And Oprah's creative director was in my apartment on Monday looking at the collection. So I think I'm the kind of person that's like, if you're really gonna do it, let people be a part of it. Let them feel like they gave you feedback. When I launched, I already had 200 advocates for the business. They felt like they had given me like input, right? And I also really valued what they had to say. So long-winded way of saying to you, Vanessa, like, solve for at least 2 out of the 3 of my criteria for starting a company. Just start doing it if you're really serious about it. Every 2 weeks, make progress. And then don't hold on to the idea. Like, let it take on a life of its own, right? Let other people be a part of it.
Yeah, and I love the fact that, NDAs, for those who don't know, is a non-disclosure agreement. And oftentimes people want others to sign NDAs. That's pretty mainstream. But, you don't believe in that because, as you said, everyone has your idea. The question is, how do you execute against it? And so I think that authenticity that you have and that openness is really unusual. Has it actually ever backfired on you?
I mean, I would not say that everyone has to do things my way. Let me be open with you in that, like, I'm humble in the fact that, like, this is how I've done it. And by the way, I've made so many mistakes. I would say 80% of the time my ideas or actions fail. Only 20% of the time do they really get it right. We are in a lucky position in that we patented 2 of our core products. So we have patent protection on thing, but we also we have an HSN business. So we had to patent to make claims on air. But it has not backfired on me because I really like it when people share in it. Like, for example, size inclusivity, right? I was doing we were doing size 0 to 26W since 2013. Now it's like the cool thing to be size inclusive, right? I don't mind. Like, that's not a new idea. By the way, I know that our fit and the products we make are the best at size 18, 20, 22. I know that. I just know that. And so I don't mind when people try to execute against the same concept. By the way, there's room for all of us. Like, I don't, especially in fashion, you all have like 12 brands in your closet, right? I just want to own your favorite piece. Like, you wear 10% of your closet. I just want one of those 5 pieces you wear all the time to be us. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be an $88 pair of black leggings. That's awesome, right?
So, one of the things that's often really hard to do, and it comes from one of our favorite parts of the interview, is something we call the domino interview, which is we have CEOs and founders like you ask a question to the next person that I'm interviewing. And so this question came from Doug Baldessar, who's the CEO of Target Swap. And his question to you was, tell us about the time you had to fire someone. Because I think that's one of the hardest things that anyone ever has to do in a job, is when you actually have to fire someone. What was it like? Why did you do it? And how did you know you had to do it?
Yeah, well, I have a really hard time letting people go, because, as you know, I'm an ENFP, so I'm a feeler. I'm a people person, and a really tough thing is 6 months into my company, we let our head designer go, and it was this hard conversation around what we knew we needed to grow over the next couple of years, and the level of experience and skills she could bring to the party, and if I would have the bandwidth to actually coach her into that role. And so it was really hard for me. I actually had two angel investors that I really trust do it with me, one from the fashion industry and one from my former McKinsey life. And the three of us let the person go together because it was my first time doing it. And it was very much around, we see so many talented gifts that you have. Here's what we're going to need for the next couple of years to make the company a success. And it just, we don't have the ability to let you grow into that.
Mm-hmm. No, you did. I mean, but it's tough, right? And did you know kind of, was it pretty early on, like after the first or second month you knew? Or did it take you a while to figure out that you could make a change?
I think I knew. I think in my gut, this is the whole thing about like, how much do you listen to your gut? Because, I think we sometimes can, it's like the Brene Brown, the stories we tell ourselves, right? Sometimes we can ignore it. So I had a gut feeling that she wasn't going to be right for the business long term. And so we tried to kind of give her really targeted coaching and kind of what we needed to see. So in my gut, I knew that 6 months in that it probably wasn't going to work out, but we were so tired and busy, and we had just launched the company, and we'd had this Oprah thing happening. And so I think when you are overwhelmed with work and the business is performing, it's easy to ignore problems.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you start to feel things get tougher, like I often say the last 4 months, I've kind of seen my team be forged in fire, and there are these amazing talents I didn't know were on the team that have kind of bubbled up to the surface. Like, people just stepped up to the plate. And then there's some people that you're like, ooh, they kind of folded. So I think, when things started to get a little tougher, a couple months into our launch, there was no choice but to make that decision. But I kind of knew it 6 months in. I just was like, oh, we're doing great. We're about to launch. We're not worried about money. We have Oprah, People Magazine, Today. We have all this amazing stuff, right? Why wouldn't you want to let that person participate in all of that?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think it's great that you did it so quickly and you asked your mentors to help you, because it's a scary thing to do the first time. So do you have a question for the next person we interview?
I do. So my question is, what's and I should tell you why I'm asking this question. One of my favorite clients at McKinsey is a gentleman named, he's not passed away, so Eduardo Belmont, and he is in Peru, and he grew this unbelievable company from scratch that is essentially the largest competitor to Avon. And when I started this company, I remember sitting down with him and saying, like, what advice do you have for me? And he goes, every day I am I'm going to say this, an asshole visionary and a humble student. And he said, I feel schizophrenic every day, because on some things I will not compromise. Like, I will not change my mind because I am the visionary. And on other things, I've had to learn or admit mistakes or say regret, or let someone else teach me how to do something. He's like, every day you're going to be an asshole or you're going to be a student. And he said, that's kind of the balance, right? That's what entrepreneurs who are very successful do well. And so I'm curious for the next person, like, what's the one thing you would never compromise on? And then what's the one regret that you have that you wish you could go back and do over again?
So if I had to flip your question back to yourself, what would the answer be?
Yeah.
I warned you I'd do that.
I know you said I would do it. My one regret, which I think everybody has, is I wish I'd spent money differently in the first year. And Vanessa and I were talking about this, and Vanessa's point of view was like, maybe you needed to learn that lesson. You remember, I'd come from a place where we had corporate American Express cards, and we had assistants, and we had all of this like unbelievable infrastructure, and we weren't afraid to spend money, right? And I think when you leave a place like McKinsey and you are stripped of your title and you're stripped of the brand name and you're on your own working in your apartment, I think sometimes you feel like you might need to compensate for that. So there are a bunch of things I wish I, in the first year, hadn't spent money on. There's probably $100,000 of things that I think about now that I'm like, we did not need, you know, fancy embossed business cards for everyone. I don't even use business cards anymore. I think it's not eco-friendly, and you can just connect with me on LinkedIn. And so like, I really regret not, and my mom told me that, right? Remember, my parents owned restaurants and convenience stores and scrap metal yards, and they were like super, super scrappy. Mom's like, I don't need, why you spend money, expensive business? You send me one nice, but like, no one need that. And I really wish I had just been like a bit less worried about what people thought of me and how I spent the money. Like I told Vanessa the story of, at McKinsey, every Friday, the company pays for lunch. And so my team, basically, I would buy them lunch every Friday, and we were doing the math around it. And I said, hey guys, and at the time we were doing 80% health insurance coverage. And I said, if we eliminated Team Friday lunch, I can give you 100% health insurance coverage, right? Because I felt like that. And they're like, we'll take the 100% health insurance coverage, right? They did not want the Friday lunch, okay? And so it was things like that where I was like, God, I spent money on the wrong things. That's one of my regrets. And I wish I could go back and tell that person, like, be a little bit more frugal. The thing that I don't compromise on, I mean, there are a lot of things, by the way, I don't compromise on. I would say we don't compromise at all on wanting to serve as many women as possible, right? So inclusive, if you come to my website right now, every age, size, and ethnicity, that's like one of my hardcore rules, you need to see yourself on our homepage. So if you don't see your ethnicity, your age, your size represented, that's on me. We don't compromise on that. And I don't compromise on product quality and development. I personally wear test everything for at least 12 weeks. And we don't go into production unless I think it lives up to our standards. We went into production on something last fall that I knew was not going to do well, but I just felt like I needed to do it. It was like an ego thing, and it was a mistake.
Well, I mean, I will tell you that everything I've bought from you has been flawless in terms of quality. Yeah. So, and they make people look good.
You bought my favorite pants. You bought my favorite pants.
Well, you know what I love is your cape. I have your Wonder Woman cape.
Oh yeah, which that was a good collection.
Actually, tell people about the Wonder Woman collaboration, because I think that's pretty neat.
So one of the things I'm a huge fan of is make sure you stay in touch with people. By the way, like one of my analysts who worked for me is now like the chief commercial officer at like Expedia. I'm like so amazed by where people end up. And we're still in, you know, I'm a huge fan. As you now know, my middle school principal wrote me a letter this week. I'm a huge fan of staying in touch with people. So one of my clients at the firm was Mindy Grossman. She's now the CEO of WW, formerly known as Weight Watchers. She was the CEO of Home Shopping Network, HSN. And she called me because she'd seen on Facebook that I was doing a company. And she goes, oh my gosh, Warner Brothers wants to do a workwear collection inspired by Wonder Woman. And we have the exclusive on it for June 1st. And I think you'd be perfect for it. I was like, first of all, I'm not going to do Home Shopping Network. It's not like my thing. And she's like, no, you can keep your price point. It ended up doing, like, I was shocked by how fun and amazing it was. And she called me because, you know, we're on Facebook together. And we went into the first meeting with Warner Brothers. And they're like, yeah, we want to do the modern Wonder Woman. We want to do a workwear collection. And by the way, if you look at the Wonder Woman collaborations like DVF, Tory Burch, they're all, and Alice and Olivia, they're all super fun. Oscar de la Renta did like a ball gown, right, with Wonder Woman stars. And they're asking me to do workwear. I was like, she wears a leotard. I don't even know where to begin. Like, no, I don't know. And my marketing person who just graduated from Wharton was like, no, I think we should do it where she has no alter ego, that she can fight crime and go to work in the same outfit, right? And like people know she's Wonder Woman, and we'll do all these cool details that remind her of how wonderful she is, of all her superpowers. So we came up with this cape blazer that you can wear to work. Capes were really hot, have been really hot last couple of years. As you all know, AOC Hers was Zara, although everyone thought it was ours, so they bought ours, which is nice. Thank you, AOC. But we did capes, we did cool pants. You know, it was a really fun thing. And the most fun about it was we got to actually be a part of all of the movie marketing. So
fun. It was so fun. I love wearing that cape.
thank you for supporting. I know that you bought that on June 1st, because that was the only way you could get it.
I did. It was wonderful.
Probably because we're like Facebook friends.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm going to wrap it up because I know you've got like 8 people waiting with you for 800 bolts of cloth. But it was really a pleasure talking to you today. And I hope our listeners have learned from your journey. A couple of highlights for me. One was how to be true to your authentic self when creating your company, and just in life in general. You're one of the most authentic people I know, which I really love. Second is how not to overthink things. I think people can be in their heads a lot, and you were just taking action. Granted, you'd have a great tiger mom that kind of prompted you and catalyzed you, but you've always been someone who takes action. You can see that with the COVID response and a lot of other things that you've done. And third, how to nurture your network and to be really open with your heart, because it's all going to come back in spades. So with that, it's a wrap. And I hope all our listeners are energized to get moving and to turn their potential into action, just like our friend Lisa Sun has shared today.
Oh, thank you.